Welcome to another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, and I'm here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Today, in part two, we delve more into the world of ESG, or environmental, social, and governance issues, as a concept, of course, as well as all of the issues attended in there. ESG has certainly emerged to be a central occupation for governments, advocacy groups, and not the least, our corporations. As demands for corporate accountability change and grow, ESG is now at the center of the debate. Joining us to discuss are three people with important perspectives on this. Jocelyn Bamford is a vice president at Automatic Coating Limited and founder of the Concerned Coalition of Manufacturers. She also hosts her own very successful news forum show entitled Canadian Innovators. Bryan Gould is also with us. He's the president of Aspenleaf Energy Limited. And last but not the least is Rick Perkins. He's a member of Parliament for South Shore St. Margaret's in Nova Scotia, and he is also the Shadow Minister for Innovation, Science and Industry. Welcome back to all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Getting back to the questions about ESG, and Bryan, I want to start with you on this. How does, I think you did raise governance issues as kind of a focal point of your concerns. How does ESG fit into the fiduciary relationships between the investor, the shareholder, and the C-suite? I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, so let me give you a couple of insights. First off, I mean, we track and measure many of these factors. So this is not about lack of transparency or accountability. It's about prioritization and allocation of resources. I have a board of directors. They represent the investors in the company. And by the way, we've also, through ESG, stigmatized this concept of profitability and return on investment. And my investors, we're not, these crazy rich oil barons as portrayed by the Prime Minister. My investors are pension funds, college endowments, medical research institutes, art galleries. These are the things that people really care about. And our profits, when we make them, flow to those causes. And to me, that's how you fund ESG and prosperity. We do govern through this. We report on our environmental performance. We track our relationship with communities. And I think Rick made the point in some earlier questions. We do this because it's in the best interest of the company. We cannot operate if we do not have good relationships with the communities that we operate in. We do a ton of work with First Nations who live in our communities and are our neighbors. And we're very proud of that. But we don't do it because we're told to do it. We do it because it's the right thing to do. And it creates an environment where our business can succeed and thrive. So that's how the system works. And I would suggest that when people let the system govern itself, we will find the right ways to do the right thing for success.
Jocelyn, I'd love to get your perspective too, as a business person. The reason I raised the fiduciary responsibilities is because there's a lot of settled law on this in Canada and elsewhere that the management has to look after the interests of the investors and the shareholders. And now there's this overlay of ESG, which may not be in the interests of the investors and the shareholders. I'd love to get your perspective on it.
Yeah, 100%. And you just have to look at what happened with the cryptocurrency FTX company, who got a better ESG score on governance than Exxon. And, that was looking to be like a giant Ponzi scheme. So you look at this and it doesn't meet the smell test. And as Bryan said, we have a duty as companies to make sure that we are looking after our employees. We are looking after the environment. There's current rules in existence that regulate all this. Layering on ESG just adds red tape. And it really is not about letting the free market run as the free market, but it's about, I would argue, replacing the incumbent energy provider, which is the fossil fuel industry, with green energy, and on the taxpayer's dime. So, if you took that taxpayer's dime out of the green energy movement and you just said we're going to let the best products move and fail on their own efforts, you wouldn't see the move to green energy that you do. And so you look at it, and it's just it is nonsensical
Right.
what they're pushing.
Right. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with our panel on environmental, social, and governance goals. Jocelyn Bamford, Vice President of her company, Bryan Gould, President of his, and Member of Parliament Rick Perkins to boot. So, Rick, going to you, first of all, did you have any comment about this fiduciary obligations versus ESG, or should I?
Sure. Yeah. Just quickly, before I was elected last year, I served in C-suites of companies, both in financial services and retail, and on boards of directors for them as well. And these issues come up in terms of the environmental sustainability of your business as a matter, of course, of being a good business going forward. In a lot of cases where it dovetails is when those things actually produce better shareholder return. For example, converting your lighting in retail stores to the latest lighting techniques that reduce your energy bills and save energy, converting, if you have chillers in grocery stores or beverage alcohol stores, converting those to ones that bring in outside cold air in the winter. All those things produce a return on investment. And companies do that by their nature because it makes them better and respond to what customer demands are, but also saves money.
No, a very good point. And I'm going to go back to you, Rick, just to comment on this, and I think our other panelists will want to jump in too. But it just from the nature of this conversation, it almost appears as if there's an ESG industry now that multiple people that's their job, and it seems to be their job in government as well as sort of in the corporate suites as well. Rick, do you want to comment on that first?
Yeah, well, we know that the government of Canada in the last 7 years has grown by 75,000 people. It's the biggest growth in employment in this country has been the federal government, but it's in strange areas. So, for example, artificial intelligence, a vastly emerging thing, and the Department of Industry, which you used to be minister of, Tony, they have one person working on artificial intelligence, but in the Department of Fisheries, they've added 4,000 new people, 1,000 of which are in HR, corporate planning, and finance, not actually producing anything. So we see this, and we see the intervention in another bill that's being discussed in the House by former Liberal minister, now MP Jim Carr, 235, which requires the greening of the prairie economy. So it's a federal minister mandated and overseen consultation process on anything that develops on the prairies, on top of whatever other consultation process you may have to do for your regulator or do just as a good business or because of court rulings. All companies do massive amounts of consultation. And the federal government now wants to get its leg in on it and do another consultation process. It's in third reading, if you can believe it, this terrible bill to duplicate everything companies already do.
Bryan Gould, do you see the same thing from your vantage point, the growth of this as an industry?
Yeah, I see a feeding frenzy, frankly. So we've got the growth in government jobs, as Rick has pointed out, but now you have all the gatekeeper trackers who see a business opportunity here. So, when I'm asked, well, why do they all support it? Well, because they see a business. So, there's all the accounting firms want to get in on telling us how to measure our business, how to manage our business, and they see this as new lines of business. So there's an overflow now from these government-created jobs to private industry, and I just look at it as a feeding frenzy of non-productive bureaucracy that's there to just track and measure and centrally plan.
Jocelyn, I'm sensing you're going to agree, but I'll allow you to add your 2 cents worth.
Yeah, and the icing on the cake to all of this is a lot of these NGO groups take taxpayers' dollars. So they're taking money from the average Canadian business, and then they're giving it to these NGOs that create push for this ESG movement. So it's just a pyramid of extortion, with the people that produce things, the small businesses, being the one that ends up paying for it, and the average Canadian.
We're going to go to break soon, but I want to pose the question, and I want you guys to think about it over the break. But I just noticed that Elon Musk, you may have heard of him, he recently tweeted that ESG is the devil. He did it in response to Standard & Poor's delisting Tesla from the ESG 500 index. So is this where this issue is going? That is to say, capital control, and obviously something that Musk cares about, but you might have a point of view on this as well. So we're going to put this question to our guests after the break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. So I kind of laid the table before the break there. Yes, Tesla has been delisted from the ESG 500 index, which makes no sense to me, but I'd love to get your point of view since Mr. Musk did tweet out that ESG is the devil. So Jocelyn, we'll give you proud of place here. Why don't you start us off?
Yeah, you know what? It's the politicization of absolutely everything in our society. So if you're on the wrong team and you're supporting free speech, we're going to punish you through our ESG. And this is what keeps me up at night. It's no longer the market that drives it. It's a bunch of politicians, elites, that push their political view on absolutely everything. And the fact that they can delist Elon Musk should scare the bejesus out of everybody, I think.
Rick, what do you think when you heard that?
Well, the first thing I thought is, what a badge of honor that would be. Like, who wants to be part of that group anyway? As long as you can raise your capital through the public markets that you need to. I'm not sure, if some Norway fund doesn't want to invest in you. I'm sure that there's lots of other capital out there that'll invest in you, since what drives capital is profits. And you know what? I agree with everyone on this panel. Profits are a good thing. Without profits, we don't get innovation. Without innovation, we wouldn't be talking to you today on the internet. We wouldn't have the vaccines we had to fight COVID. That all comes from profit, which creates innovation, which creates jobs. And if capital wants to make less money, well, so be it. But I think most capital will go to where they can make the most.
Yeah, Bryan, love to get your point of view on this. I mean, maybe it's not a big issue that Tesla was kicked out of the ESG 500 index. Maybe capital will find a way to invest, or do you think that capital control is coming?
So I differ a little bit from Rick. I do worry about capital control. I see my investors, they're under extreme pressure. I have visited my investors while protests have been going on outside. The pressure on them is immense to toe the line. And not to be too ominous here, but I see elements of 1936 in what's going on now in terms of control, not allowing people to speak their mind, and I'm deeply concerned more broadly than just on ESG. Right. But I see shadows of 1936 here.
So I'm going to bring it back to Jocelyn. I guess on one level, again, I'm trying to assess the damage this is creating. And, is this just a corporate greenwash standard that is the price you pay? Or is this something that is in particular for small businesses a worry? We were talking about global elites like World Economic Forum, the United Nations, what have you, setting these standards. I think, Jocelyn, you've been the most pointed on this in our broadcast. It's easy for large corporations to incorporate that into their vision statements or what have you. But for small businesses, this is a real issue. Please comment.
Yeah, 100%. It's a huge issue because, could you be restricted from capital because you're not towing the political line that they have decided is in the ESG? Could you be denied the ability to offer your goods and services to large corporations because you're not towing the line? And this is really about, let's face it, this is about command and control of not only the economy, but what we think, what we speak, and how we do business. And who wants that? Where has it ever worked where government picks the winners and losers, and it's just making corporations now adding on to them to pick the winners and losers. This is not the way we run a free market system.
Rick, I guess I'm going to bring it back to you. What should government be doing and what should they not be doing in this sphere?
Well, I'll pick up on what Jocelyn said, which is I think government does have a perfect record in that regard. It has a perfect record of actually not being able to pick winners on any shape or form in any industry. It is a colossal failure, particularly in my part of the world, in Atlantic Canada, where it's been tried many times. So I think, we've got to get government out of the way to allow the private sector to do what it does. And the markets will dictate to companies what they need to do. So I was being a little glib earlier, Bryan, about a badge of honor, but the reality is it is worrisome, and we need to make sure that we elect governments that can resist those global pressures to impose their own moral thoughts on business. As long as businesses are operating in the interest of the people that own them, that's what should drive our markets.
And with that, we're going to take another brief break. We'll be back after these messages. I asked Rick before the break, what should government be doing and not doing? I wanted to leave that question for our other guests as well. Bryan, what are your thoughts on this?
Mostly they should get out of the way and stop trying to get in business. They're not business people, and they shouldn't try and be business people.
Jocelyn?
100% agree with Bryan. They need to get out of the way. We hear from consecutive governments how they're going to reduce red tape. They never do. They add to red tape. The amount of surveys I have to do for the government on everything from my environmental spend to business forecasts is absolutely absurd through Stats Canada. Let's stop making it more difficult for me to run businesses. And we have seen so many companies, especially small to medium-sized companies, just say, you know what, I'm done. I'm out of here. So they either relocate growth, they relocate their business, they just fold up the shop. We have a lot of entrepreneurs that are of retirement age. They're just like, they're done. Or they sell out to a large multinational. And none of those things are good for the Canadian economy because we have a relationship in small to medium-sized business with our employees. They're our families. We work together to overcome whether it's a health issue or they need money for their family. We all just work it out. So let's let business work it out. Government already has rules in place. Just back off and let us do our job.
Bryan, I'm going to just come back to you because I think you alluded to this earlier on in the broadcast, but is there room for a more nuanced and balanced approach? Let's just say for the sake of argument that ESG has enough momentum that it's going to be around in some form or another, but does it have to go to the extremes? Is there a way to build into the dialogue, how things actually work in business, as you have pointed out?
I believe there is a window. So there is some good inside of the concept, and I think we all agree we should protect the environment. We should protect the less fortunate in our society. These are good things. We should have meritocracies where it doesn't matter what your background or skin color or beliefs are. So these fundamentals, I think, are solid. The issue I see is how they're being implemented. And I think there is a much more sophisticated, you could call it nuanced approach that would make much more sense to me.
Jocelyn, what you want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, my concern is that it's a slow incremental growth. So first, you're going to have to report on these metrics, and then you're going to have to report on those metrics, and pretty soon you're doing more reporting than you're actually doing producing. And we need to focus on our customers and what they want. And as Bryan alluded to, we do look after the environment. You'd be out of business if you didn't. We look after our employees because they're what get us to where we need to be. So we need to look after employees. We just don't need financial institutions and the government and the media telling us how to run our business. I think we've proven ourselves with technology and innovation and what we can do. They just, again, need to let us look after our customers and employees as we do.
Rick, you get the last word here, but it looks like that there could be a more reasonable approach to dealing with the issues raised, but that would require government to get out of the way because they're not actually helping, they're hurting the situation. I'd love to get your commentary on that.
Well, we have some great centers of corporate governance in Canada that lead the way on corporate governance thinking and ideas, and they put out great papers and great guidance, as do our certification systems for boards of directors that we have in Canada that help educate directors and people who run businesses about how to incorporate these issues and what to watch out for as a fiduciary responsibility as well on the environment and on human resources and on forced labor and your labor supply chains. We have great stuff that's already out there as part of the education of directors. Doesn't require the government to do that. Businesses doing it already because it's in their interest to do it in order to ensure that they can maintain their relationship with their customers.
And with that, I'm afraid our time is up. A very interesting topic. I do want to thank our guests for being part of this double-decker broadcast on ESG. Thank you, all of you, and I would love to have you back sometime. Thank you again.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Great discussion today on environmental and social governance by just a stellar panel. They knew their stuff and raised some important issues. This issue is not going to go away, and thank you for taking the time to research it with me today.